Good day, boys and girls, and welcome to History Grade 6, Term 2. In this term, we'll be looking at explorers that came from Europe to find South Africa. This all happened during a period called the Renaissance. Now, in 1400, people from Europe knew very little about the rest of the world. Europeans only began to explore other parts of the world about 600 years ago. Before we look at two people that had a great influence during the Renaissance, we need to ask ourselves, what does the word Renaissance mean? Now, when we look at our keywords, it describes it as a time in history in which many new ideas were developed. It's also sometimes known to be a turning point because it's a time when important changes start. Now, the European Renaissance was a period of time in Europe that took place between the 15th and 16th centuries. During the Renaissance, art, literature, and the ideas from ancient Greece were rediscovered. The Renaissance began in Italy and spread to other parts of Europe. This happened at the same time as the kingdom at Great Zimbabwe. There were many gifted individuals who made a contribution to the Renaissance. Their new ideas influenced how Europeans studied the world they lived in. Their work and their ideas still influence the world today. We will look at just two of them in the case studies found in the PowerPoint. The first one is Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest thinkers that ever lived. He was a very curious person who asked lots of questions about the world around him. Leonardo had many talents and interests. He studied how the human body worked. He was fascinated by nature and studied many plants and animals. Leonardo da Vinci was an inventor. He tried to build a machine that would help people to fly. Leonardo drew the first plans for a helicopter, bicycle, motorcar, and a wristwatch. It's important to note that he didn't invent these things, boys and girls, but he drew plans for them. So he drew the very first picture of a helicopter and described how it would work. Same for the bicycle and the motorcar as well as the wristwatch. His plans were later used by many inventors that lived after him. Leonardo da Vinci was also one of the greatest artists and sculptors of all times. Leonardo's work and his attitude helped him to increase European knowledge about how things worked.
Leonardo da Vinci, the true Renaissance man. No doubt you'd recognize the Mona Lisa, and you've probably seen a model of one of his countless inventions. These are all the work of Leonardo da Vinci. The celebrated painter and inventor was born in 1452 in Vinci, Italy, and those were only two of his many talents. He was also a sculptor, architect, philosopher, engineer, and scientist. His portrait, the Mona Lisa, is the best-known painting in the world. He painted it between 1503 and 1506, and the identity of the woman behind that mysterious smile is still disputed today. Almost as famous is his mural, The Last Supper, which portrays Jesus with his disciples. Leonardo experimented with a new type of paint for the mural, which is why it's unfortunately very faded. Typical for the Renaissance, his subjects were mostly religious. Yet his work demonstrates that his true fascination was with nature, why clouds form, how plants grow, or how the human body is put together. Anatomy is also the focus of the Vitruvian Man, a human being standing in the center of a circle and a square. Leonardo's groundbreaking drawing depicts the ideal human body measurements and proportions. Today, the drawing is featured on Italy's €1 coin. One of Leonardo's greatest dreams was to fly. By observing the movements of birds, he invented the very first flying machines. A parachute was later assembled by scientists in the year 2000 using his original design, and it worked. The sky wasn't the limit for Leonardo, who was fascinated with water too. He studied the flowing motions of the waves and applied his discoveries to technological innovations, including diving gear, irrigation systems, and the very first water meter. As an engineer, Leonardo was centuries ahead of his time. As early as 500 years ago, He designed the first precursors of the tank and the automobile, and even a solar reflector. He spent his final years in France. By his death in 1519, he had developed a legendary reputation as a uomo universale, or jack of all trades. To this very day, Leonardo da Vinci is widely considered to be one of the most extraordinary people of all time.
The next great thinker we will be discussing during the Renaissance was called Galileo Galilei. Before the Renaissance, people in Europe believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system. We know that in NS we learned that is not true. During the European Renaissance, some people used new knowledge of mathematics, science, and technology to increase their understanding of the planets, the sun, and the stars. Galileo used a new invention, the astronomical telescope. That means a telescope that can look into the stars and into the planets, that can see the planets from Earth. And he used this to study the moon and stars and sun. Galileo's study showed that the sun is at the center of the solar system and that the Earth and many other planets revolve around the sun. Many great scientists today say that Galileo was responsible for the birth of modern science.
This is the story of Galileo. Meet Galileo Galilei. He was born in 1564 in Italy and went on to become an astronomer, physicist, and mathematician. Today, he is viewed as the father of modern science. However, back in the early 1600s, Galileo was not popular. At that time, the Catholic Church had a lot of control over people's lives, and they didn't like some of Galileo's theories. So what did he believe, and why did it upset the Catholic Church so much? Let's go back to the early 1600s and start with Galileo's investigations into the moon. The Church believed that the moon had a perfectly smooth surface.
It's a smooth.
But through his telescope, Galileo observed that the moon was actually covered in craters and mountains.
You're wrong.
He then published his findings, which really upset the Church.
Boo.
The Catholic Church also believed that the sun was perfectly smooth.
It's a smooth.
But Galileo discovered it was covered in darker areas called sunspots.
You're wrong.
He also realised that the sun was rotating. This was yet another blow to the Catholic Church's beliefs. Galileo also disagreed with the old belief that the Earth was at the centre of our solar system. Instead, he believed that the sun was at the centre of our solar system and was orbited by the Earth and the other planets. He even took measurements to prove it. Finally, the Catholic Church had had enough. They put him under house arrest for 9 years, meaning Galileo couldn't leave his home or share his observations.
Don't even think about it.
He spent much of these years researching and wrote his now famous work called Two New Sciences. Galileo died in 1642, still under house arrest. Despite many objections to his ideas at the time, Galileo is now recognised as an important astronomer and scientist. Many of his theories proved to be accurate and have helped future scientists understand more about our solar system. He was indeed the father of modern science.